Well, can you believe that Miggery Sow's father sold her? That's crazy. Well, let's see what happens today in chapter 25 of Tale of Despero, A Vicious Circle. Miggery Sow called the man who purchased her uncle, as he said she must. And also, as he said she must, Mig tended Uncle's sheep and cooked Uncle's food and scrubbed Uncle's kettle. She did all of this without a word of thanks or praise from the man himself. Another unfortunate fact of life with Uncle was that he very much liked giving Mig what he referred to as a good clout to the ear. I think a good clout to the ear is like grabbing it and squeezing it. In fairness to Uncle, it must be reported that he did always inquire whether or not Mig was interested in receiving a clout. Their daily exchanges went something like this. Uncle: "I thought I told you to clean that kettle." Mig: "I cleaned it, Uncle. I cleaned it good." Uncle: "Aye, it's filthy. You'll have to be punished, won't ye?" Mig: "I cleaned it, Uncle. I cleaned it so good." Uncle: "Are you saying I'm a liar, girl?" Mig: "No, Uncle." Uncle: "Do you want a good clout to the ear then?" Mig: "No, thank you, Uncle. I don't." Alas, Uncle seemed to be as entirely unconcerned with what Mig wanted as her mother and father had been. They discussed the clout to the ear that was delivered, but it was delivered, I'm afraid, with a great deal of enthusiasm on Uncle's part, and received with absolutely no enthusiasm on Mig's. These clouts were alarmingly frequent, and Uncle was scrupulously fair in paying attention to both the left and the right ear. So it was that after a time the young Mig's ears came to resemble not so much ears as pieces of cauliflower stuck to either side of her head. And they became about as useful to her as pieces of cauliflower. That is to say, that they all but ceased their functioning as ears. Words for Mig lost all their sharp edges. And then they lost their edges altogether and became blurry, blankety things that she had a great deal of trouble making any sense out of at all. The less Mig heard, the less she understood. The less she understood, the more things she did wrong. And the more things she did wrong, the more clouts to the ear she received, and the less she heard. This is what is known as a vicious circle. And Miggery Sow was right in the center of it, which is not, reader, where anybody would want to be. But then, as you know, what Miggery Sow wanted had never been much concern to anyone. Let's do another one. That was short. You want to? Let's do chapter 26, royalty. Do you know what royalty is? Let's find out. When Mig turned 7 years old, there was no cake, no celebration, no singing, no present, no acknowledgement of her birthday at all, other than Mig saying, "Uncle, today I'm 7 years old." And Uncle would say in return, "Did I ask ye how old you were today? Get out of my face before I give you a good clout to the ear." A few hours after receiving her birthday clout to the ear, Mig was out in the field with Uncle's sheep when she saw something glittering and glowing on the horizon. She thought for a moment that it was the sun, but she turned and saw that the sun was in the west where it should be, sinking to join the earth. This thing that shone so brightly was something else. Mig stood in the field and shaded her eyes with her left hand and watched the brilliant light draw closer and closer and closer until it revealed itself to be King Philip and his queen Rosemary and their daughter. Who's their daughter? The Princess P. The royal family was surrounded by knights in shining armor and horses in shining armor. And atop each member of the royal family's head, there was a golden crown. And there they were, the king and the queen and the princess, dressed in robes decorated with jewels and sequins that glittered and glowed and captured the light of the setting sun and reflected it back. "Gah," breathed Meg. The Princess Pea was riding on a white horse that picked up its legs very high and set them down very daintily. The pea saw Meg standing and staring, and she raised a hand to her. "Hello!" the Princess Pea called out merrily. "Hello!" And she waved her hand again. Meg did not wave back. Instead, she stood and watched, open-mouthed, as that perfect, beautiful family passed her by. "Papa," called the princess to the king, "what is wrong with that girl? She will not wave to me." "Never mind," said the king. "It is of no consequence, my dear." "But I'm a princess, and I waved to her. She should wave back." Meg, for her part, continued to stare. Looking at the royal family had awakened some deep and slumbering need in her. It was as if a small candle had been lit in her inside, sparked to life by the brilliance of the king and the queen and the princess. For the first time in her life, reader, Meg hoped. And hope is like love, a ridiculous, wonderful, powerful thing. Meg tried to name this strange emotion. She put a hand up to touch one of her aching ears, and she realized that the feeling she was experiencing, the hope blooming inside of her, felt exactly the opposite of a good clout. She smiled and took her hand away from her ear, and she waved to the princess. "Today is my birthday," Meg called out. But the king and the queen and the princess were by now too far away to hear her. "Today," shouted Meg, "I am 7 years old."